All right. You should know all major figures that we have covered up until this point. To give you a hint, we have had a handful of Greek, only 4 Roman, and only 1 medieval. I'm not going to focus on the medieval because we've covered a lot of it, though I will reference some of the stuff that was from last time that we already covered. With that in mind, this key figure for the Greeks wrote basically the book by which we even examine plays today. It was the student of Plato, Aristotle. Aristotle, what was his writings on theater called?
Poetics.
The Poetics. In the Poetics, he is going to talk about, I've seen a lot of plays, and in plays that are good, they do this, and in plays that are bad, they don't do this. And in that, he gives us words we continue to use today, such as his word for chief actor. Protagonist, which is the main character of a story. He also gives us the word antagonist, which is used in literature today.
The one who opposes the main character.
It's the opposition to the main character, literal translation. He that opposes does not have to be an individual, can be the elements of nature themselves, but it's something that is going to cause issues for the protagonist. That stated, Aristotle lays out his elements of drama. Number 1 on that list was tick-tock, tick-tock.
Plot.
Plot. What is plot?
The structure of the story.
It's how you're going to build the story. So plot came in at number 1, and he said plots all contain 3 parts, and they are, yes, a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so in his paradigms of laying it out, when we hit one of these parts in the beginning, we're going to hit a moment where the story is going to change in trajectory, and then something else is going to happen, it's going to change, and then something else. And then that 3-act structure, basically he lays out where a lot of theater is going to be built to this day. What was number 2 on the list?
Character.
Protagonist, antagonist. He was big on the idea we must feel empathy for the protagonist, for the audience to care about what's going on. Number 3,
thought.
Thought is the story. And so I use Law and Order as an example. Same plot, different stories every episode. Number 4,
diction.
the spoken word, the language that is used. This was particularly important when anything happened on stage because we didn't see a lot of it.
No, it was just very
Descriptive.
very vivid.
The language had to explain everything that was going on, and this is going to exist all the way through the Renaissance and Shakespeare and into the period, touching the Enlightenment. And so after diction and language, we have
The music.
music was used in all shows. They had an orchestra pit. We know music was vital in the telling of these stories. And finally, we have
Spectacle.
it's all visual elements that go into a show. It is easy to dismiss spectacle, but Aristotle does not. He just puts it last. It's not saying this is unimportant. He's just saying there are other things that we must focus on more. This is one that, we may not have the best ability to pull off. And so it ends up last on that list. Whom did Aristotle believe to be the greatest playwright?
Euripides.
Incorrect.
Okay.
Say it. Nope. Nope, it's not. What? Sophocles. Sophocles is considered to be the greatest of all Greek tragic writers. In fact, you could argue he is the greatest writer of the classical age for drama. When I say classical age, what am I talking about?
The Greek classical age.
And
The Romans.
the Romans. The Greeks and Romans are the classical age. The classical age comes to an end, and the next period is?
The Dark Age.
What the Dark Ages are the beginning of? The Middle Ages.
Yeah.
The Dark Ages are only the beginning of it, and remember, academia, tries to move away from that. I still use the term, but most people refer to them today as the early Middle Ages. And so, Sophocles wrote, what Aristotle considered to be his great, the great classical drama, and that was
Oedipus Rex.
Oedipus Rex. Rex means what?
King.
King. Tragedy always concerns nobility. If you're going to have a fall, you got to have some height behind you. And so, it is a tragedy, and so what happens to Oedipus at the end?
A very, very painful fate.
Isn't it he gouges his eyes?
Yes, he does.
Walks like
He is exiled. He's basically pushed out like Cain. Good luck, you're on your own. And of course, he gouges his eyes out because what has he learned?
that he mated with his mother.
I love how you phrase that. He made it with his mother. And
Two
then,
kids with his
and had a couple of kids with mom, and
Killed his father.
he killed his father. And so he has committed incest, and he has committed patricide. And so,
Regicide,
he's made the full circle. And so after pulling off the hat trick, and he finds all this out in one day, it was a really bad day. In the end of the day, he gouges his eyes out after his mother does what?
Kills herself.
She kills herself, having found out what has occurred.
Probably would too.
And so, she is not doing well with it at all. So, that is the tragedy of Oedipus Rex, which Aristotle thought was so incredible because Oedipus at no time knows that he is the reason everything is bad, that he has done anything wrong. So, Oedipus Rex runs off stage, and we find out that he has gouged his eyes out because who comes out to tell us?
The
The
chorus.
chorus.
A member of the chorus, a servant, a slave. Who is the writer that revolutionized the chorus? Not everyone at once. Well, he was Greek.
Oh, was it Aristophanes?
No.
Okay.
Euripides.
No. But that's a hell of a hooked on phonics way to tell me that.
You said
Sophocles we've just covered. Sophocles took what this man gave as a framework and built from it.
Aeschylus?
Aeschylus. He's older than Sophocles, and after him, everybody starts using the chorus in a certain way. And so the chorus he brings down to the number 12. We know him today because he has our only complete
A trilogy.
trilogy, and that trilogy is the Orestia or Oresteia, the first part of which is
Agamemnon.
Agamemnon. And it is a tragedy. What is the tragedy of Agamemnon?
Let me think. He conquered the Roman Empire.
No.
That's another one.
There is no Roman Empire even in existence at this time. But what is the tragedy? What happens to him at the end?
He dies.
He dies. Who kills him? His wife and her lover. 10 years waiting and boiling over the sacrifice of her daughter. And so she gets even with him at the end. Remember, tragedy is the death or permanent impairment of the protagonist. What does tragedy mean again?
Means goat and song.
Goat and song. That sacrificial animal, bam. If your name's in the title, you're that sacrificial animal. Things are going to get very bad for you. And so that takes us to our last of the tragic poets. This was our phonics moment.
Euripides.
Euripides. Euripides was the youngest of the poets. What is his masterwork?
Medea.
Medea. What is the tragedy to Medea?
It's that she kills her own sons.
She kills her own
Takes
sons,
everything away so it can't be taken away from her.
and she also kills
Her husband's wife.
her husband's wife-to-be, and...
Their children, she does, and then she's exiled, and then she kills the husband, I'm pretty sure, as well.
Nope, she doesn't kill the husband. He has to live.
He has to live and she has to live, so, like...
The
she
suffering
basically says, like,
continues.
if you can't have anything, neither will I. So, like,
You know, she butchers everything, and also she kills the family of the bride to be that he is going to marry. So there is nothing for him at the end, and then she is exiled. Agamemnon, his station in life was he was a king in general. Medea was born a princess.
And she fled her home country.
Yep. And so once again, though, it's the idea we're way up here, things fall apart. Those are all tragedies. We had two comedic poets when it came to the Greeks,
One was Aristophanes.
Aristophanes, and the other was
Menander.
Menander. One of these men wrote in New Comedy.
Menander did.
Menander wrote in New Comedy. What is New Comedy?
That's just kind of like slapstick.
Slapstick, domesticated arguments.
Easy to
You know,
digest.
these things happen. Probably won't ask you that Dyskolos is the only example we have of New Comedy by Menander, but I know I will ask you Old Comedy's example from Aristophanes, his masterpiece. Lysistrata.
Lysistrata.
Crash Course went into a great deal defining what that play did. Now, this was a comedy, and therefore it ended with?
Everything.
It ended being happy.
It ended being happy. There's a celebration. Nobody's dead. That's a big deal for something to be a comedy. In the end, everybody's like, hey, life is good. And so there is a celebration, usually like a wedding or the announcement of a child. You know, something is going to happen that causes everything to be okay by the end of it. With that, we had a couple of more things. The first actor was
Thespis.
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 In fact, to say an actor today, you can use the word
Thespian.
thespian. And we also had an example of our earliest anti-theatricalist,
Plato.
Plato. What is an anti-theatricalist?
Someone who hates theater.
Yes. His student Aristotle, on the other hand, loved theater. Aristotle's primary profession was,
Scientist.
in fact, his title that he carries is
The father of modern biology.
the father of Western biology. If it was modern biology, he'd have had microscopes and been carbon dating stuff. I mean, it'd be a totally different world. And so, Plato, in his Republic talks about, there's no room in the good republic for, people who aren't contributing. In writings, he has said that, actors are professional liars, and there's no room in a good republic for liars. He has said theater sells fantasy when we need people to live in the now. He was not a fan at all, whereas Aristotle was like, I don't know what was wrong with him. This is perfectly fine. Let's roll with it. And he really enjoyed theater overall. The Greeks presented their theater in what type of theater?
Amphitheater.
Amphitheaters. If today I walk into a theater and the audience is seated on one side, what sort of theater am I in? Tick tock, tick tock.
That's an amphitheater.
No. Proscenium. Thank you. The proscenium arch. Most popular form of theater in the Western world today. If I walk in and the audience is on all sides, arena, otherwise known in the theater as in the round. Yes. If I walk in and it's the rarest type of traditional stage I could imagine, I'm looking at a wrong traverse. A traverse, which in theater is normally called
An alley stage.
an alley stage. And then if the audience is seated on three sides, this is your moment. A thrust, finally. And so we made it to a thrust. If it doesn't fit one of these definitions, we are looking at a flexible stage. A performs B for C.
A is the actor, B is the performance, and then C is the audience.
Okay, so who told us that? Eric Bentley. A performs B for C is his attempt to define what is theater. With that in mind, C, you just said, is the audience. Another wise man, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, said that for an audience to really enjoy theater, they must do what?
Willingly suspend their disbelief.
Willingly suspend disbelief, which means
Just kind of accept the reality of it. And
accept what is happening on stage as if it is true, though you know it is not, for the sake of the story and the theatrical event to work. Now, there is another individual who is defining theater for us, and if we use Eric Bentley's definition, he actually drops one of the letters.
That's Peter.
It is Peter Brook, and what does he eliminate from the equation?
Does he eliminate the D?
Yes. He doesn't care what the middle is. It is irrelevant to him. It's really irrelevant to Eric Bentley, too. He just defines that there must be the expectation there. Peter Brook is sitting there saying, if you got performers, you got an audience, you got theater. Roll with it. And so, what does the MPAA stand for?
North of,
No, wait,
movie.
Make sure you look that up. And so, what came before the MPAA?
The NPAA. Is that
No.
okay?
What came before them?
Oh, the Hays Code.
The Hays Code. And the Hays Code falls apart in the early 60s because this play was made into a movie.
Who's Afraid of Virginia?
What is the main demographics that attends theater?
Adults.
Well, they're paying for it, but, what is the demographics?
I guess younger people.
Look that up. Put it down. You've got to actually search for what is the main demographic that's going to attend theater. That said, we had 4 major figures for the Romans. Before I move there, all Greek actors wore what?
Masks.
Mask. There were female and male masks, but all masks represented the genres tragedy and comedy. In fact, today the symbol of drama are these masks. It's not that they just made them up, it's because from the very beginning these 2 masks were practical and used.
Really quick, just remember what MPAA means. It means Motion Picture Association of America.
You are correct. MPAA, Motion Picture Association of America, they're the people who put the ratings on things as advisement, quote unquote, for
Arbitrarily
in some instances highly arbitrary. And so all actors wore masks. What device did Aristotle frown upon using to end a show?
A Deus Ex Machina.
The God Machine, Deus Ex Machina. All right, let's see. The 4 major figures that we had for the Romans, one of them is often been called the Roman Aristotle.
I heard Terrence was in them.
Yeah, but he wasn't called the Roman Aristotle.
Who was on? Was it Seneca?
Nope.
Was it Platus?
Nope. You've already named all the poets.
Those are the poets, sorry.
Called the Roman Aristotle. Aristotle wrote, what was his critical work on theater?
Poet.
And this person wrote The Art of Poetry.
Horace.
Horace.
That's okay.
Horace is not the same as Aristotle. Aristotle was a scientist who wrote, I've seen this, this worked, this didn't work. Horace, on the other hand, is basically writing stuff like, your play has to be 5 acts. You must never mix the genres. He is laying down basically rules for people to follow. He also says that theater, the aim of the poet is to profit or to please. In this sense, the profit is
The income of money.
which would be incorrect. It's not about income, it's about the enrichment of one. And so that enrichment is to teach, to learn, to come out knowing something that, otherwise we wouldn't have. He was the guy who was preaching, if we put bad things on stage, people will do bad things. Therefore, we must have people have consequences if they do bad and rewarded for doing good. He also, there's some things he agreed with, Aristotle with, like Deus Ex Machina, not the best thing, but then some things are pretty random at times. 3 poets for the Roman period. The only tragic writer I gave you,
Seneca.
Seneca, who adapted his plays from
The Greeks.
the Greeks, but what did he do to them?
He made them more Roman.
He made them more Roman. And then the 2 comedics,
Platus and Terence.
Platus and Terence. And so, with Platus and Terence, the only one that I really gave you some background on is the only one where we have all his works. Terence. And one of the things that distinguishes Terence,
He was from Africa.
he was from Africa and not a Roman citizen at the beginning of his career, but he does become a Roman citizen, and then with that citizenship, he disappears somewhere. We don't know where he goes. It's like, I think he may have been as young as 20, and he's like gone. But the 6 plays he wrote, we still have, which is remarkable for that time. The classical age begins with the Greeks. It migrates over, of course, to the Romans, and then that transfers over to the medieval period. The medieval period features the fall of the Roman Empire and the rise of
The church.
the church. The Holy Mother Church rises up, and its first reaction to theater is
Ban it.
Dionysus is a pagan god. The pagan gods are evil. Therefore, the theater is
Evil.
yeah. You can see how that logic kind of works its way out.
Well, at least for the first 5.
Yes. In those first 500 years, I often call the Dark Ages, but really are called more today the early Middle Ages. But they come in and they crush everything. In fact, one of the reasons we have so few plays, less of these plays than we even have Greeks, is that the Christian church burned everything. And so they were basically trying to eradicate. They also, took apart temples to like Apollo, and then they built those into churches. You can find a lot of remnants of temples that were built throughout Rome in the Vatican today, because they were like, that column will look great over here to support things. And so they just moved things around and repurposed. That said, when the first 500 years begins to fade away, the church turns to theater to begin instructing in the principles of the church. And in that we begin what sort of theater?
Liturgical drama.
Liturgical drama. There are 2 types of liturgical dramas I focused on.
There was
Morality plays
Mystery plays.
and mystery plays. Mystery plays are actually telling a story from the Bible, whereas morality plays are not telling a particular story, but are telling basically a lesson about Christian ethics. And so, with that, the most famous of the morality plays in English, just talked about it today.
That one is Everyman.
And an example I gave you of a mystery play, but really in the late period, which was a comedy,
The Second Shepherds.
the Second Shepherd's play. What were used as theaters in the first part of liturgical drama?
The church.
The church. Performances occurred in the church. We moved past that over time, but churches were where you went to go see theater. Who were the performers in these plays?
Members of the church.
The layman, the common person in the church. The clergy put it together. That is how it's going to be for a very long time. When we go back to the Romans, we have professionals, and we go back to the Greeks, we have people who are basically professional performers. There are some slaves on stage also, but those main characters are mainly being played by people who act for a living. Thesbus is not out there, saying, what's my other job going to be? From what we know, he was just that big actor, and that's how he supported himself. Those are the main figures that you're going to have to know. The plays that you're going to have to know. So if I were to say Sophocles' masterwork is Oedipus Rex. If I were to say to you, this playwright refined the chorus.
That would be Aeschylus.
Okay. If I were to say to you, A plus B equals C. A plus B equals C. Bail them, quickly, bail them. They're drowning. Eric Bentley, in his attempt to modernize and, much more modern definition of theater. If I were to say to you that this is the most widely used staging of theater in the Western world,
It would be the proscenium.
yes, if I were to say to you the main character in a show was called,
The protagonist.
there you go. Of Aristotle's Poetics, the protagonist is found under which one?
That would be the character.
Correct. And character was number 2 on the list. This has a beginning, middle, and end.
That's the plot.
The plot. Aristotle's masterwork,
Poetics.
Poetics. Euripides' masterwork, Stab, stab, stab kids, Poison, 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 younger woman, Medea. Thank you. You should be able to just look and recognize, such as the masterwork of Aristophanes,
The Orestia trilogy.
that would be Aeschylus.
Aeschylus, okay.
Lysistrata. Yeah. Listeria is a disease, but Lysistrata is a play. But both come from a Greek origin. And so, ladies and gentlemen, listen up. Do I have any questions? Think about it, folks. Once, twice, and so listen up.